two nations. Both survived genocide. One had a written constitution before most U.S. states did. The other's language was so complex, enemy code breakers couldn't identify it as a language. And yet, most people think they're the same. They are not. The year is 1838. Winter in Georgia. The kind of cold that cracks wood and turns rivers black. Somewhere along a frozen road in the American South, thousands of men, women, and children are walking. Not by choice, not toward anything good. They are walking because a president signed a piece of paper, because a government wanted their land more than it respected its own Supreme Court. The highest court in the United States had already ruled that this removal was illegal. And Andrew Jackson looked at that ruling and ignored it. Between 4,000 and 8,000 Cherokee people died on that march. They called it Nunadal-Tsuni, the trail where they cried. Now here is what most people were never taught. And the Cherokee, being driven from their homes that winter, had a written constitution. They had newspapers. They had a legal system. Their literacy rate surpassed many white settlements surrounding them, and none of it saved them. But here is the deeper question, the one this story is really about. Who exactly were these people? And why, more than 180 years later, how does the world still confuse them with an entirely different nation 1,500 miles away, in a desert that looks like another planet? Stay with me. What you are about to learn is not what you were taught. Before we dive in, this channel runs on your support. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and hit the notification bell. It truly means everything to us. Now, let's get into it. If you stopped 100 people right now and asked them to explain the difference between the Cherokee and the Navajo, most would pause, shift their weight, offer something vague about reservations or the American Southwest. Almost none could tell you anything specific, anything real. American popular culture has done something quietly damaging to its indigenous peoples. It has compressed them. A flattened 274 federally recognized nations into one silhouette. The image from old film posters and school textbooks.
Of the Great River and the
Each of those nations, every single one, has its own language, architecture, philosophy, and legal tradition. And the popular imagination offers us one image. The Cherokee and the Navajo are famous. But famous is not the same as understood. These two nations are not variations of a theme, not dialects of the same story. They are two entirely different civilizations, separated by language family, cosmology, political architecture, and the specific painful texture of their histories. We begin where every honest conversation about a people should begin, with their language. Here's a fact that should stop you cold. In the early 1800s, a man named Sequoyah, born to a Cherokee mother and a European-American father, watched the world around him changing. He could not read English, and he had never been taught any written language. Not one word. But he understood something his contemporaries did not. The Cherokee people needed a way to write their own language, in their own terms, on their own conditions. So he invented one. From 1809 to 1821, working largely in isolation, Sequoyah developed a complete syllabary for the Cherokee language. 85 characters, phonetically precise, internally logical, built from scratch by a man who had never read a single word before creating an entire writing system. Within a decade, Cherokee literacy surpassed many white settlements nearby. The Cherokee Phoenix, a bilingual newspaper in Cherokee and English, began printing in 1828. A people running their own free press in their own invented alphabet, while the government planning their removal debated whether they were civilized enough to deserve rights. Now travel 1,500 miles west. A high desert, red canyon walls, a sky so wide it seems to bend. This is where the Navajo language was born, and it could not be more different. Cherokee belongs to the Iroquoian language family, traditions of the eastern woodlands. Navajo belongs to the Athabascan family. Its closest relatives are found in northwestern Canada and Alaska, not in the American South. This tells us the Navajo followed a migration path across this continent entirely different from the Cherokee, separated by millennia of distinct travel, contact, and development. Navajo is tonal. Pitch matters. Its verb system encodes movement, direction, shape, and intention inside a single word, in ways that require a completely separate grammatical logic to parse. So complex, so unlike anything in European or Asian linguistic experience, that during the Second World War, the U.S. military recruited native Navajo speakers as battlefield communicators, not to translate into a cipher, and to speak directly in Navajo. Japanese signals analysts, with full access to intercepted transmissions, could not identify any pattern. They did not recognize it as a language at all. The Navajo Code Talkers, roughly 420 men, Pacific Theater, 1942 to 1945. Major Howard Connor, 5th Marine Division signal officer, reportedly stated, "Without the Navajo, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. But here is the part that should genuinely make your jaw drop. We will get there." Because the Code Talker story contains one of the most jaw-dropping contradictions in American history. Hold that thought. Two nations, two language families, no shared ancestor, no common ground. Calling them the same is like saying Mandarin and Portuguese are similar because both have been spoken on the same planet. Language reveals structure, but land reveals soul. The Cherokee inhabited the southern Appalachian region, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, northern Georgia, a densely forested, river-threaded, rich soil. They practiced the Three Sisters system, corn, beans, and squash, planted together in mutual support, a polyculture that fed Cherokee communities for centuries without depleting the land beneath them. Not accident, applied science. They built permanent villages, established councils, and by the early 19th century, a formal government structure that drew on both Cherokee tradition and Republican institutions. The Cherokee Nation had a written constitution in 1827. Many American states had nothing of equivalent complexity. Now, travel west. The Colorado Plateau punishes carelessness. Arid, canyons dropping 1,000 feet without warning, temperatures swinging 50 degrees between sunrise and sunset. The Navajo did not merely survive here. They built a civilization of thought around it. The traditional Hogan faces east, toward the rising sun, not architecture, cosmology. Every element carries meaning within the Navajo system called hozo, a concept most translations reduce to harmony or balance. But hozo is bigger than either word. It describes correct alignment between an individual, their community, the natural world, and the cosmos, simultaneously. When that alignment holds, health follows. When it ruptures, illness results. Navajo healing addresses that rupture, ceremonies lasting days, restoring the disrupted pattern. are plant compounds embedded in that tradition. Western medicine has since isolated and in some cases incorporated them. Not primitive, different. By the late 1820s, Cherokee territory covered land American settlers desperately wanted. When gold was discovered there in 1829, the pressure became a frenzy. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. The Cherokee fought back, not with weapons, but with law. In Worcester verses. Georgia, 1832, Chief Justice John Marshall ruled the removal unconstitutional. The Cherokee Nation was a sovereign political community. Georgia had no authority over their territory. Jackson proceeded anyway. In the winter of 1838 to 1839, U.S. Army troops rounded up approximately 16,000 Cherokee and forced them westward toward what is now Oklahoma. Inadequate food, minimal shelter. Between 4,000 and 8,000 people died. And on a march ordered by a president who lost a legal argument and chose to ignore the verdict. And here is what is rarely taught. The Cherokee were not removed despite their sophistication. They were removed because of it. Their prosperous farms and organized government made their land more coveted, more urgently desired. Civilization was not protection. It was a reason to be targeted. 3 decades later, a different catastrophe in a different landscape. In 1863, the Brigadier General James Carleton ordered the forced removal of the Navajo from the Four Corners region. Army forces destroyed crops, burned orchards, slaughtered livestock. The objective, surrender through starvation. It worked. Beginning in 1864, approximately 10,000 Navajo, Dine, meaning simply the people, were forced to march roughly 300 miles to a military internment site at Bosque Redondo, New Mexico. And the Navajo call it Hueldi, a word carrying connotations of suffering no English translation can reach. Conditions were lethal, land unsuitable, water contaminated, disease spread rapidly, hundreds died within the first months. Then, something happened that almost never happened. In 1868, after 4 years of failure, the United States government admitted it had made a mistake. The Treaty of 1868 allowed the Navajo to return to their ancestral lands. One of the very few times in American history, an indigenous nation successfully negotiated a return home after forced removal. It was not full restoration, but they returned. They rebuilt. The Cherokee, for the most part, did not. What do you do when the military campaigns end, but the erasure continues? Beginning in the 1870s, the United States government funded a network of federal Indian boarding schools. Children, sometimes as young as 5, were taken from their families, and often without consent, sent to institutions hundreds of miles from home. Speaking indigenous languages was prohibited. Indigenous names replaced with English ones. Cultural practices forbidden. Richard Henry Pratt, founder of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in 1879, stated the philosophy plainly: kill the Indian in him and save the man. He meant that as a positive statement. For the Cherokee, children arrived at institutions where that language, the one with its own invented alphabet, its own newspapers, its own literature, was punished out of them. Generations grew up without the vocabulary to name the world the way their grandparents had. For the Navajo, children arrived speaking only Navajo. They left years later without full fluency in either language, not bilingual, linguistically stranded, between two worlds, with full access to neither. Stop, because this is the part that should make you sit back in your chair. Now, while the federal government ran schools dedicated to extinguishing the Navajo language, while children were being punished for speaking it, the United States military was simultaneously recruiting Navajo men specifically because they spoke it. The Navajo Code Talkers program launched in 1942. The Marine Corps recruited young Navajo men, many of whom had spent years in the boarding school system being told their language was worthless, shameful, and these same men were now needed to transmit military communications that no enemy analyst could crack. Some of the men who served as code talkers had been punished as children for speaking the exact words they were now being asked to use to win a war. The state that tried to kill the language needed it to survive a conflict. This is not irony. This is structural contradiction as government policy, the simultaneous destruction and exploitation of a culture, taking what is useful, suppressing what is inconvenient. The Code Talkers were not declassified until 1968, over 2 decades after the war. The Congressional Gold Medal was awarded to the original group in 2001, 56 years after the war ended. Did you know the government was trying to erase their language while using it at the same time? Drop that in the comments. I genuinely want to know. The exploitation did not stop with language. Navajo lands sit atop significant mineral wealth, uranium, coal, oil, and natural gas. During the Cold War, the United States nuclear weapons program needed uranium. Between the 1940s and 1980s, more than 4 million tons of uranium ore were extracted from Navajo land. The miners were overwhelmingly Navajo men. Ventilation in the underground mines was not standard. Workers brought ore dust home on their clothing. The mining companies knew the health risks. Scientific research on radon gas exposure had existed since the 1940s. The Navajo miners were not told, and health consequences followed in the decades after. The EPA has since identified over 500 abandoned uranium mines on Navajo land. Groundwater contamination remains active in multiple communities today. The same pattern across Indigenous territories throughout the country. Take what is useful, deny the damage, acknowledge it slowly, partially, decades too late. The most common grammatical error in discussions of Indigenous peoples is the tense. People say, the Cherokee were, at the Navajo had, as if colonial policy completed its work, as if what we are discussing is archaeology, not living reality. Here are the facts. The Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma has more than 430,000 enrolled citizens, one of the largest indigenous nations in the United States by population. Its own government, judicial system, health services, and business enterprises. The Navajo Nation controls approximately 17.5 million acres, larger than the state of West Virginia, spanning Arizona, and New Mexico, and Utah. These are not museum exhibits. They are sovereign political entities navigating the 21st century. But sovereignty does not erase the legacy of what has been done. Healthcare access, infrastructure, and educational resources on many reservation lands remain significantly below national averages. In spring 2020, the Navajo Nation had one of the highest per capita COVID-19 infection rates in the entire United States. The reasons were structural, not incidental. Limited access to running water, overcrowded households, healthcare facilities separated by vast distances. The Cherokee Nation mobilized effectively to protect its citizens, but the disparities it worked against were not natural. They were inherited. Here is the most urgent dimension of this story: language. The Cherokee language is in genuine crisis. Fewer than 2,000 fluent first language speakers remain, the majority over the age of 50. And the Navajo language is in a stronger position, the most widely spoken indigenous language in the United States, with an estimated 170,000 speakers. But younger generations show sharply lower fluency rates. The boarding school rupture is still visible in family structures today. When a language dies, it does not merely take words, it takes categories of thought, relationships between concepts that exist nowhere else on Earth. The difference between a dying language and a dead one is the difference between a river and an aquarium. You can study an aquarium, you cannot live beside it. And here, the story refuses the easy, tragic ending. The Cherokee Nation operates Kituwa Academy, a full immersion school producing fluent young speakers for the first time in generations. Children who speak Cherokee on the playground, who will carry it forward not as artifact, but as lived language. Adine College integrates Navajo language and Hasho philosophy across its curricula, a university built on the principle that Navajo knowledge is not supplementary to education, it is education. Young Cherokee and Navajo creators make content in their ancestral languages on platforms no federal program ever anticipated, reaching young people where they actually live. The elders are being recorded, the stories archived, the songs taught. And not because the crisis has passed, it has not, but because the alternative is surrender, and these nations have a centuries-long history of choosing not to surrender, so why does any of this matter to you? Because the confusion between the Cherokee and the Navajo is not a harmless mistake. It is a habit of abstraction that has always had consequences. When you reduce people to a category, you no longer have to engage with their specific history. Yes, you respond to a general image instead of a specific reality. The Cherokee who marched in 1838 were not a category. They had specific names, specific farms, specific children, specific plans for a spring planting they would never complete. The Navajo man, who went underground into a uranium mine in 1952 and came home with dust on his jacket, was not a statistic. He was someone's father, someone's husband, someone whose government knew what the dust would do. And said nothing. 2 nations. 2 language families. 2 distinct migratory histories thousands of years old. One from the forests of the American Southeast. One from a high desert plateau that looks like another world. Both targeted by the same colonial state, both surviving it, both still here, fighting to maintain the specific irreplaceable inheritance that forced marches and boarding schools and careless grammar all conspired to erase. They are still here. And the Cherokee syllabary is still being taught, by children who will teach it to their children. The Navajo language, the one that cracked military intelligence, the one punished in federal schools, the one the Marine Corps needed to win a war, is still spoken, still changing, still alive. They are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. And understanding why is the beginning of understanding something true about this continent, about history, like about what it actually costs. When a civilization decides that the land it wants matters more than the people already living on it, that is not ancient history. It is a pattern, and patterns only change when enough people are paying attention. If you made it this far, Thank you. It means more than you know. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe if you have not already. Drop a comment below. We read every single one. And please hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. This channel only grows because of you. We are grateful for every single one of you. See you in the next one.